Hey everyone, it's time to Nefis and chill, and this video we'll be going over a Stamina Nightblade DPS build for PvE in the Elder Scrolls Online, updating our previous Stamina Nightblade DPS build called the Shade, again showcased by Inquisitor Mordrak, who is trying to show you guys the best possible damage setup, what could do on the raid dummies and on actual trial bosses whenever possible as a Stamina Nightblade. As usual, this kind of build video will cover alternative setups, including things like trash setups, dungeon setups, solo setups, and so forth, while also going over specifically the rotation, as that is indeed the most important thing apart from gear and stuff like that, to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Furthermore, there is a written guide to this build as well. We'll be briefly going over things like static rotation and stuff like that, but if you ever want to just kind of go get some references and look at more specific things, definitely check out the build page on the ESO University website. It will be down in the video description and also in the comments down below. Let's start off. For the stats, recommended race for this build is going to be Dark Elf. Recommended Mundstone is going to be the Thief. I would highly recommend that you put all 64 attribute points into Stamina. Consumables will include the Lava Foot Soup and Salt Rice, and the Essence of Weapon Power. You can also do Artaeum Takeaway Broth or Dubious Cameron Drone if need be in content, depending on your sustain. Or if you have great sustain and you're in content, I would recommend buy stat food. The best race at the moment is going to be Dark Elf for the Nightblade, and honestly, kind of generally across the board for medium armor setups, this for update 35 and update 36. Just a forward, this build is basically it for update 35 and 36 because there's nothing really changing between Firesong DLC and Lost Ops DLC. So this will be good up until probably early 2023 unless nothing changes again. But yeah, the best race is going to be Dark Elf. Behind the Dark Elf, however, is going to be the Orc, which is going to be about a 0.8% difference in damage. Khajiit is actually going to be 1.5% difference with the Dark Elf. However, in solo content, arenas and dungeons, the Khajiit might be a better choice because it is a bit more difficult to reach the critical damage cap of 125% in non-trial groups. But yeah, anyway, if you are a beginner or you just don't really care about optimizing your damage as much as some raiders do, you feel free to choose whatever race. Anyway, let's go over the primary gear setup. We're going to have a 2-piece Kilnar's Nightmare, both in the light armor trait, weight, and we're going to have all Divine's traits and stamina enchantments, just as a heads up for all the gear. We're going to have 5-piece Pillar of Nirn on the front bar. This is a very strong proc set, and because update 35 touched a lot of things and nerfed some things like dots and stuff like that, you're going to see a lot of players across many builds kind of borrow more power from proc sets. So things like Pillar of Nirn, Reliquin, Sororia, even Zan. You'll see a lot more of that, and sometimes chosen over things like mythics such as Harpooner's Waiting Kilt. So anyway, the other 5-piece set is going to be Reliquin, and that's pretty much it. It's no surprise as well that on the back bar you're going to also have the Maelstrom's Greatsword, because that is technically also a proc set as well. And we'll go over skills real quick before we start going over the alternative setups, and then we'll go over the rotation. The skills is going to be as follows. On the front bar, Concealed Weapon, Merciless Resolve, Silver Bolts, Killer's Blade, Barbed Trap, and Incapacitating Strike. Back bar is going to be Stampede, Carve, Twisting Path, Debilitate, and Dark Shade, and you can put an alternative ultimate, but Incapacitating Strike is going to be fine for single target setup. What I really love about the Nightblade class actually is the fact that if you see the skills right here, right, you can actually go ranged much more easily than Dragon Knights or even Necromancers can. And that's what I really love about Nightblade as a class this patch. It's very versatile. For update 35 and even update 36, you can go ranged. All you have to do is basically swap out the weapons you use and not too many skills. I mean, you can use Silver Bolt or Silver Shard, whatever. And that's what I really like about Nightblade. But yeah, let's go over the static rotation real quick. I'm just going to put this up that Inquisitor Mordrak made for you guys, and on the video. You can again refer to this on the website. I won't be going over the static rotation in this video because you have to kind of swap out a few skills here and there, and also swap out the Maelstrom two-hander on the back bar with a set of Black Rose Prison dual daggers for Spectral Cloak. So there's a few differences between the dynamic rotation and static rotation, not in terms of just rotation and skills, but also in terms of the gear setup. So I won't be going over it too much in this video, but yeah, I'll go over the dynamic rotation because I believe that if you understand the dynamic rotation, you can kind of basically understand everything else, really. Other than that, before we go over the rotation itself, we have champion points to cover. So again, green tree is kind of like whatever, as long as you have Steed's Blessing. Warfare is going to not really change too much. We have Master at Arms, we have Deadly Aim, we have Wrathful Strikes, and we have Exploiter. And that's basically for a general kind of single target setup. Obviously check your critical damage value for deciding on Backstabber and Fighting Finesse in content, depending on the groups you run with. And lastly, for fitness slottables, this will depend a lot on content, more so than it being a general kind of thing. So if you have any questions about what kind of fitness slottables you should use in certain trials, like Kind's Aegis and stuff like that, definitely come by the ESOU Discord, or just check the FAQ section on the ESOU website, as we cover that as well. Alright, now let's go over setups for various things, and also the alternative setups. Remember that there is a unique setup for each boss in a lot of the trial content, so if you want the maximum results, use ESO logs or just ask around in the raiding community, where you can, observe other people using certain things for certain bosses, and I would kind of like learn from other people. Otherwise, you can refer to this video in terms of the setups here. For the single target setup, we have the usual Counter's Nightmare, Pillar of Nirn, Reliquant that we just covered. However, if you don't have Reliquant, you could replace Reliquant with Whirl of the Depths. You can also swap out the Carve skill with NT Cavalry Caltrips if you can't hit the target for at least 30 seconds, and if you need more Cleave, NT Cavalry Caltrips is a better option than Carve, depending on the kind of fight. And if you want to replace Counter's Nightmare, you can do it with the set, monster set Stormfist, especially if there's already a person in the group with counters already, because the counter monster set can only really be used by one person in a group. And Stormfist also has the added advantage of having more cleave damage. And if you don't like using Greatsword on the back bar, definitely it is viable, and even in certain cases optimum, to swap it out with the Maelstrom Staff or the Maelstrom Bow for a little bit more comfort, and also added AoE radiuses. All types of the Maelstrom weapons are kind of really close in terms of damage, so you won't suffer too much swapping from a Maelstrom Greatsword to a Maelstrom Bow or a Maelstrom Staff. For a single target with cleave, meaning at least 2 targets, you can still go with the similar setup of Coral Riptide with Sogvins and Mora's Whisper with Slimecraw. But what if you don't have Mora's Whisper, because the leads are definitely difficult to get? I would definitely recommend replacing Slimecraw and Mora's Whisper with Stormfist or Prior Tyrek if all the targets are in a tight stack. And if you don't have Coral Riptide yet, you can still opt for using the Whirl of the Depths recommendation that I just recommended earlier. So it depends again on the fight. If you have a more static fight and all the targets are in tight stack, I would definitely recommend these substitutions. If not, you can still stick with the setup on the video. Other than that, let's go over the trash setup. We have Slimecraw's Guys, we have Mora's Whispers, Soul Zahn, and Burning Spellweave is still a really solid trash setup for both Update 35 and Update 36. The only difference here in terms of the front bar, I know a lot of people were using the Asylum Daggers, right, for pre-Update 35. I think that's still fine to use. However, if you want, you can also try out the Black Rose Perfected Daggers with MrPrecise as traits and Flame and Poison as enchantments. On an added note, if your trial group or whatever group does not, have the Elemental Catalyst for trash fights and stuff like that, or even minor brittle debuffs present, you can definitely swap out your Proximity Detonation with Channeled Acceleration for trash fights. Next, let's talk about the dungeon setup. Dungeon setup is pretty similar to the other setups in the fact that you're still going to be using Pillar of Nirn. It's a really strong, solid set, so I recommend getting it. You have Moor's Whisper instead of Harpooner's Waiting Kilt as a crit mythic. We have Slime Craw in the light armor weight, and we also have Yandir's, which is just kind of like Soul's-On and a couple of the other sets. For the past few patches, it's still a solid set to use, and it's kind of pretty good for the 4-main stuff. And on the back bar, you can use a Maelstrom Infernal Staff of some kind, but again, if you want to go with a Great Sword or a bow, that's fine too. And if you feel like you can replace Camouflaged Hunter with Concealed Weapon on the front bar to get the passive effect of Concealed Weapon, and you can also replace Vigor with Anti-Cavalry Caltrops if you have a healer in the group, that could give you a bit more damage as well. Lastly, for the solo or arena setup, I do recommend the Valken Scoria one piece for the penetration. We also do have Order's Wrath, which is a very recent craftable set as a post High Isle. Order's Wrath is actually one of those really solid, once in a lifetime kind of like craftable sets that are actually pretty freaking useful. The last set like this, I feel like in terms of usefulness, was Diamond's Victory, which was unfortunately nerfed, kind of like right after people found that was good. So I hope Order's Wrath stays around a bit longer, because it is a really nice, solid craftable set, and I would highly recommend using it for solo instances or even arena setup, like Maelstrom Arena or whatever. And Yandir's is actually a good 5-piece front bar as well, and if you want to go ranged, because I know a lot of people like going ranged in specifically solo instances like VMA and Battlefront Hollows, that is definitely a solid option. So you can do Yandir's front bar range, and of course back bar can be something else like a staff or a bow. One thing to note here, as you can see on the front bar from the screenshot, Power Extraction, which is the second skill on the front bar, is a really good AoE spammable now, because it gives you Minor Courage and Major Brutality. So if you have Camouflaged Hunter with Power Extraction on the front bar, you don't have to use weapon or spell power pods. You can just use Tri-Stat Potions, which is like, okay, now not only is that good for your Magicka sustain, because as you can see here, you can be using a lot of Magicka skills like the Wall, Twisting Path, Shade. Not only that, but you also get health back from Tri-Stat Potions. So I think it's a very comfortable setup if you want to go with this setup. But yeah, again, you can use something else besides a staff on the front bar, but like daggers. But like I said earlier, I know a lot of people prefer using the range setups for solo instances. But anyway, that's pretty much it for the setups. And again, check the website if you found it hard to keep up in the video. Alright, now let's talk about the primary rotation itself that can net you over 127k DPS for update 35 and 36. To start off with your rotation, definitely pre-buff before you engage your target or dummy. You pre-buff by casting Merciless Resolve and Shade without pulling aggro of the boss or the dummy, and then after you cast Merciless Resolve and Shade, approach your target to cast Barb Trap and Shooting Star. Once you do that, the opening rotation is going to be cast in the following order with a light attack in between each ability: Stampede, Merciless Resolve proc if you had stacks before, Twisting Path, Debilitate, and Carve. Now, since it is a dynamic rotation, meaning you just basically try to keep up your timers as best as possible, there is still an order of priority in terms of the skills you need to recast, because some skills are stronger than the others. So the following should be cast in order of priority from highest to lowest: Carve, Merciless, Stampede, Barb Trap, Twisting Path, Debilitate, and Shade. A really good tip here is to always use Incap in the first 1 to 2 seconds of the target being off balanced. Always remind yourself to not reapply no more than 2 damage over time abilities during the time frame of off balance, because once the off balance time frame starts occurring, that's your moment to gain as much damage as possible.
Artificial love. Artificial love. We just make it up. 'Cause reality will never be good enough. And even if it was, we just mess it up. How can you know what's in our mind? When in between the good and bad, there's such a thin line. How can you know?
For your execute rotation, use Killer's Blade instead of Silver Bolt, starting at 38% of the target's health. Stop using the Merciless Resolve bow proc once you hit 23% of the target's health, while ensuring you have the 5 stacks built up on the Merciless Resolve, and use Killer's Blade as the only spammable from that point forward. Up until 20% of the target's health, just recast Shade, Carve, and Debilitate as your damage over time or ability effects. At 15% of the target's health, stop recasting Twisting Path. Finally, after you reach 6% of the target's health, ignore recasting anything else besides your Killer's Blade and finish the fight. And that's pretty much it for the dynamic rotation. Practice does make perfect, and again, if you are uncomfortable with the dynamic rotation, definitely you can refer back to the static rotation and just work your way up from there. If you guys have any questions, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll try my best to keep an eye out for them. Otherwise, thanks so much for your support thus far. I know it's been a slow season. I know there hasn't been too many builds coming out from me, or even some of the other content creators who are kind of feeling a little fatigued from a lot of the changes this year from ESO, and well, honestly in the past few years from ESO. But hopefully now that update 36 has been confirmed to be a period of stability, a period of some peace, we can start turning out more stuff again, and I'm also going to explore other areas of the game as well in terms of builds. So yeah, definitely please do like and subscribe, as it supports the channel and encourages us to keep going with the content we provide. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Stay safe, healthy, have fun, and see you guys next time.